This is absolutely devastating. The Buffalo Bills' season ends after an overtime heartbreaker against the Denver Broncos as the Bills turn the ball over 5 times, as well as some controversial calls called by the referees in this game. And ultimately, the Bills will go yet another season, 8 years in a row in the playoffs, without a victory. Without a Super Bowl appearance, I should say. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bills Digest. Recovering from last night, as I'm sure many of you guys are. Maybe we'll have some Broncos fans here celebrating and gloating a little bit, but ultimately, this is going to be almost like a Buffalo Bills vigil video where just talking about what a horrible way to end your season in a game that I felt far more confident in than I did against the Jaguars. About as confident as I've ever felt going into a Buffalo Bills playoff game, which clearly was not for the right reason, but when you look at the result of the game, it makes sense. The Bills turned the ball over 5 times and still should have won the game, despite only forcing one turnover of their own. And at the end of the day, the Buffalo Bills just couldn't get it done. So without further ado, let's dive into the video. A reminder, this video is brought to you by Kalshi. Use code DIGESTNFL to get $20 bonus when you spend $100 and trade on live markets. Well, may as well dive into the video by talking about the man that built this team, that has brought the Bills out of the playoff drought, that has had them in the best position they've been in since the 1990s with Jim Kelly, and still, it feels like the Bills are failing at a level that they have never failed before, and it is painful to watch what this team has done year after year, and it seems like they're just getting further away. In a year where Patrick Mahomes not in the playoffs, obviously Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow also not in the playoffs, this felt like this year would be as good as any for them to have a chance to go on a run. But with that being said, us Bills fans knew that this roster was not as good as previous years, that they were getting older, that on defense, they were weak at times, and the offensive weapons, to be quite frank, were terrible. The receiver core was as bad as it has ever been, and it cost them as they lost to the Broncos because they could not score touchdowns when it mattered most. They couldn't get receivers open down the field for the most part. And that's what cost them this game, and that's what has cost them year in and year out. Now, if you look specifically at what cost them this game, there's a lot. There's a long laundry list of things. 1, offensive turnovers. Josh Allen and James Cook. Josh Allen had 4 turnovers by himself, 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles, including an absolutely devastating fumble at the end of the first half that ended up being the difference in the game. It allowed the Broncos to get a field goal with 2 seconds left instead of the Bills just running out the clock. But instead, the Broncos take that extra lead. The Bills are in an extremely precarious situation. And then, obviously, you have the officiating late. The defense doesn't get enough stops. The offense doesn't end it when they had the chance. Nobody is to blame for this loss other than the Buffalo Bills. And this is what I had to say after this game ended. I said, Bills fans will blame the refs for the loss, and NFL fans in general. But at the end of the day, you can't turn the ball over 4 times. This was before the controversial interception that probably should have been a catch. That's besides the point. The Bills should have had a much more significant lead in which they didn't need that catch to be called. Then you have the 4-point lead in the end. You give up a touchdown on a practice squad cornerback who's 50 years old is an exaggeration, obviously, but was not intended to be an actual part of this Buffalo Bills team, but he was for reasons that I'm about to show you right here. Brandin Beane at one point claimed Darius Slay off waivers, and in a corresponding move, placed Jamarcus Ingram, one of their depth corners, on waivers. As a result, since Darius Slay did not report, the Bills lost Jamarcus Ingram and were forced to go with Dane Jackson at cornerback today because Maxwell Hairston was left in a blowout game against the New York Jets in the fourth quarter, in which he never should have been in the game, gets injured, is out for these playoff games, and now when Trey White goes down, you have Dane Jackson in the game, who gives up the game, what ends up being the go-ahead touchdown that allows the Bills not to win the game. Also, Cam Lewis, who's out for the play, Darnell Savage ends up coming in, and you're not able... And the Broncos target him immediately. One play, one touchdown. That is how the Broncos beat them. It was a better coached team. They were coaching on a much higher rate, and that has been a huge reason why the Buffalo Bills have lost in the playoffs these past few years. They were outcoached by Andy Reid. They were outcoached by Zach Taylor even, and now outcoached by Sean Payton in this game. And sure, that's not the reason why they lost. The players did not execute when they needed to. But at the end of the day, you go on this long run of losing in the playoffs, something is going to have to change. We have mentioned that so many times this year. It was an absolutely painful, gutting year with devastating losses, horrible performances by both the offense and the defense and the coaching staff. And ultimately, you shoot yourself in the foot. A season that maybe you would have had a good chance at the 1 seed had you beaten the Dolphins, had you, pulled through in a game against the Texans that you give up 8 sacks. There's such a long list of games that should have been won this year that were not, and that is why the Bills are in the position they're in now. And once again, it goes back to Brandin Beane, who did not put this roster in a position to succeed when you have maybe the best quarterback in all of the NFL, and you surround him with a great O-line, a great running back, and absolutely nothing else. It is malpractice that they were in the position they were in, and it makes you think back to the quote he made on air before the season, where he said, complaining about wide receiver is one of the dumbest arguments I've heard. Well, how dumb does it sound now, Brandin Beane? You lost a game because you did not have the receivers to get open down the field consistently enough for Josh Allen to not have to make superhuman plays down the stretch, to not have to feel like he had to do it all for this offense. And that's not excusing Josh Allen, because he did not play well in this game. They had opportunities despite that. But at the same time, you could make things a whole lot easier, and you failed to. Year in and year out, that has been the MO for this team. And whenever you have a superstar like Josh Allen saying he feels like he let his teammates down tonight, I get why he feels that way, but that's not the case. This is a team that everyone is responsible for this loss, not just the quarterback, as is the case for any team. And really, really painful to see Josh Allen feeling this way. Obviously, he has reason to feel that way, but at the same time, more pieces have to come up clutch for this team, and Brandin Beane did not put them in a good position. Now, let's talk about the plays at the end of the game. Sean McDermott coming out and saying, I'm standing up for Buffalo. What went on is not how it should go down. And while I agree with the sentiment, I'll bring you back to this. The Bills had the chance multiple times to win this game, and they did not. Now, I do want to talk about this Brandin Cooks instance, because you have to talk about it, because it is a telltale sign of where the NFL is at right now in trying to decide what a catch is. The overwhelming conversation across the National Football League and the media right now, this is an NFL playoff game. It got ruled an interception and ended Buffalo's season. This is a catch every time. Now, I don't think it's as clear as day as that, but when you look at past instances of this, whether it's Xavier Worthy last year in the playoffs, whether it was the Aaron Rodgers against the Baltimore Ravens earlier this year, just a few weeks ago, It has even all-pro defensive backs saying that there's no way that should have been an interception. Richard Sherman himself saying, I have never seen a contested catch like this ever be called anything but a catch. Even as a DB, you know that if it's even a tie, it will go to the receiver. Can't believe this decided the game. And there is the argument that I've been making that I still believe that the Bills had every chance to win this game. You cannot blame the officiating for losing. I am still sticking to that. At the same time, though, you can't deny that if this were ruled a catch, the Buffalo Bills would have won this football game despite all of the mistakes they made because they are the better team. They have Josh Allen. They have the better quarterback. They played better football. But at the end of the day, the Broncos made fewer mistakes. It kept them in the game against a team that outplayed them. And they were able to win at the end of the game, whether it was because of the officiating, whether it was because of execution. You can make the argument for either one. But at the end of the day, this is something that needs to be discussed in the NFL. What is a catch? We don't know. And that is the most frustrating part of post-game here, less than 12 hours after the Bills' season has ended. But you look at what the box score looked like, and it had the makings of a team that should have won the game except for the turnovers. Josh Allen, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, a really, really solid game. 25 of 39, really solid numbers. James Cook, 117 yards on the ground. Josh Allen, 66 yards on the ground. And then Kincaid having a nice game, specifically at the end. Shakir, a nice game. And then some contributions outside of that, but not a whole lot brewing there. So ultimately, it came down to these factors that I showed you earlier. Lots of things went wrong in this game, but I will say this. I do want to end on a positive note because there are things to look at that can make you feel a little bit better about this team. One being, this roster was not good. Actually, real quick, before I get into this, I do want to highlight some of the Brandin Beane decisions made in the offseason that the Bills didn't get a sack in 46 pass attempts in this game. They signed Rousseau, signed Hoyt, who was injured. That seems to be a good signing, though. Bosa played terribly. Ogunjobi did not look great. D-line, second, third, and fourth rounds. Only TJ Sanders really made an impact. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Deion Walker made a huge impact, but still not able to get a sack. You can place blame wherever you want there, but at the end of the day, Brandin Beane has some explaining to do. But now I want to get into the silver lining real quick. The Bills losing in the playoffs every year seems like Groundhog Day. Consider this. Peyton Manning didn't win his first Super Bowl until he was 30. He went 3-6 in his first 8 seasons. Josh Allen 8-7 in the playoffs in his first 8 seasons. So, certainly some things to look forward to. But ultimately, he's 29 years old. He's still got plenty of time left in his career. But time is ticking. This is a guy, unlike Peyton Manning, who does rely on his athleticism to a certain degree. He is a great quarterback without his athleticism too, but he's just not the same. The window's closing, and the Bills are going to need to make some major changes in the offseason. More videos coming soon on what those changes will be. Do your best to enjoy the rest of this postseason if you can. I'll be rooting hard for the Texans today and rooting against the Patriots the rest of the season. But this has been Bills Digest. I'm Josh Schreiber. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, comment, and we'll see you next time.